Good evening, everyone. Thank you for coming, and thank those who are watching online for watching online. My name is David Kent, and I want to welcome you to the St. Thomas Poetry Series. This is the second book event we've had this year this is our 35th anniversary year of readings. And tonight we're welcoming two distinguished Canadian poets, Alice Major of Edmonton and David Waltner Toews of Kitchener. They share an interest and a strong connection with the world of science.
David?
Yes.
Can you do the microphone a little closer to your mouth?
All right. How's that?
Better.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thanks for telling me. Each of our readers will be introduced by people of distinction as well. Alice will be introduced by Allan Briesmaster, who is an old acquaintance, I gather, of Alice's from the League of Canadian Poets. And David will be introduced by Hildi Froese Tiessen, who also has a long acquaintance with David. She's from Kitchener. Alan's from Thornhill. I want to start with a few quick thank yous, though. First, I thank the Church for their support over 35 years of readings. And I want to thank the Canada Council for financial support through the League of Canadian Poets and the Writers' Union of Canada. Thirdly, I want to thank the folks who are helping us behind the scenes, Pat Kennedy and Margot Swiss, who are helping with refreshments. Michelle Mayer Van Herk, who is watching over the book table and selling books tonight. Bob Kennedy and Bill Wilson, who are overseeing the live streaming. And Julie Armstrong and Christine Cover for the promotion and the program, which I will go fetch in a moment. I'm going to ask Allan to come and introduce Alice. And Allan, of course, is very well known as a poet and a publisher and an editor extraordinaire. So Allan, if you would come up and introduce Alice.
If I were to detail all of the many accomplishments of Alice Major, I'd be taking quite a long time here. And as it is, I think I want to say more about the extraordinary book that she's going to be reading from. Alice Major has been writing poems of great distinction for many years. She has also been a tremendous community builder in ways that have benefited hundreds of fellow poets while widely connecting other people with poets and poetry. Recently, she's been a contributor to Reimagining Fire, a project to bring visual artists, writers, and scientists together to create work related to climate change. And she was invited to read at the UN's COP15 conference on biodiversity in Montreal. My own personal connection with Alice was first through being welcomed by her as a new member of the League of Canadian Poets when she was its president. And later, watching her steer the ship of that organization away from the shoals of financial crisis. Afterward, I was much impressed with her founding of the wonderful Edmonton Poetry Festival and delighted that she was Edmonton's inaugural poet laureate. As I said, I could go on at much greater length listing her various honors and accomplishments. But I came to admire Alice's poetry even more than all that. Alice writes ingeniously in forms and styles that suit and freshen the wide variety of subjects she takes on, which tend to be big picture ones, the very nature of things and human nature from a range of perspectives well informed by an understanding of the sciences, physics, geology, biology, physiology, mathematics, and the social sciences as well. Inevitably, her passionate intelligence turned in her two most recent books, Welcome to the Anthropocene and this new one, to the state of our planet, the harm we humans have done to it, in her words, the careless vandalism perpetrated by our species, and the dire threat posed by the climate crisis to life itself. Alice has the ability to make art out of these fearful and dismaying matters in ways that are both sobering and imaginatively courageous, while at the same time enlightening and morally fortifying. In a very fine recent review of Knife on Snow, fellow Alberta poet Richard Harrison concludes, "It's been said that art's value is the way it lets us escape the world. But if that was ever so, that value's time has passed. The beauty of the poems here is not the siren beauty of forgetting the world, but the beauty that rouses the resolve to save it." My own response to this book as a whole is much the same, and in his review, Harrison also rightly praises the unusual content of each of the book's 5 diverse sections. So although one's ultimate response can and should include a call to action, I now want to briefly observe the ways in which Knife on Snow stands out as a multidimensional work of art of the highest order, a verbal fortress one can return to contemplatively in resistance to despair. Although the first test of value for any book is its immediate impact, the greater value of a book like this one, keeps on being released whenever one accepts its invitation to revisit for further discoveries of an inexhaustible wealth. That wealth, in this case, I think, is embedded in the layers of knowledge and understanding its poetic language embodies. In the first section, there's the powerful use of alliterative verse lines in the Anglo-Saxon style, together with explorations of Norse mythology and its apocalyptic, world-ending catastrophe, Ragnarok, in conjunction with the Fort McMurray wildfire and others. In the second title section, a deeply disconcerting personal anecdote is woven together with the reflections of the Roman historian Ammianus Marcellinus on the fall of the empire. The third section insightfully explores the psychological and political ramifications of the anger that is so widespread in our society. The fourth employs variations on the sonnet form to meditate on a mass extinction that took place in an epoch of deep time with distant parallels. And the surprising final section takes us on a tour of the solar system in a series of Japanese-style haibun, prose poem plus haiku, where the bizarre conditions on other planets offer metaphors for the human predicament on our own. Through its poetic art, this book gives a witnessing of dreadful realities and possibilities that makes them bearable to contemplate and actionable without paralysis or surrender. It may seem strange to add this, but even so, I found Knife on Snow a rare pleasure to read. And you will now have the pleasure of hearing some of the poems in the author's voice. Come on up, Alice.
Thank you so much, Allan. I almost feel like I don't have to read the book at this point. You've been so kind to it. And I also want to say a very special thank you to David Kent and to the St. Thomas Press for welcoming me. I'm sorry, I'm popping here, aren't I? How am I sounding? Okay? Yeah, for St. Thomas Press. I was just thinking this afternoon, realizing that David brought out my little book, Corona Radiata, 23 years ago. And I was here to read in St. Thomas Church then. I may be still wearing the same skirt. The other acknowledgement I want to make is that I live now on what we call Treaty 6 territory, which I found by accident, not knowing its history, and have come to realize has been the homeland and loved landscape of people, indigenous peoples, for literally 10,000 years. And there have been poems and stories and prayers composed and are still being composed. I'm glad to be part of that tradition. And in a way, it enters into what I'm going to read you tonight. So, I wanted to read you the excerpts from the title poem, Knife on Snow. It was a real knife on real snow, something I walked out to find in my backyard on a winter night, like a large chef's knife that was just there with no clue as to how it had arrived. I have very high caragana bushes all around my yard. How did it get there? And that set me off thinking, people have always been trying to read the significance of things in the sky or things that come from the sky. This unsettling and weirdly personal object, it made me think about what brought it there. There's always history. Now, and at the same time, I was reading the history by Ammianus Marcellinus, written close to the end of the 4th century CE, just before the fall of the Roman Empire, at the beginning of what was the age of migration, a period of immense turmoil, movement among tribes from Asia Minor right through Europe to the western shores of Europe. So while I was reading Ammianus, once again I was thinking about how history doesn't end. And we sometimes these days think that we feel we're living in end times. I'm sorry, we don't get out of it that easy. There is always going to be more time. So I want to read you kind of a tour of this particular poem. It starts with an epigraph from Ammianus. These dangers, I, a former soldier and a Greek, have set forth to the measure of my ability. Wicked wedge, its shape embossed on the untracked snow crust of my city yard. Blade crusted with frost. The sky is, as always, dark at this early winter evening hour. There are streetlights in the alley. Glum sodium burns like the light of dying stars. What arc of history brings this here so deep inside my property, surrounded by a wall of Caragana 15 feet high, dropped impossibly like a god's random hammer, a silent, unnerving thunderbolt. Its anonymous menace, the lack of explanation for its cold and alien metal presence, irrational. Yet surely it called for agency, intention to fling the blade this far. My hedges grow thick and tangled. There must be rage beyond my narrow bailiwick, my guarded fiefdom in the snow. This took one hell of a throw. I need to know its provenance. What mysterious trajectory aims this silver point at me? The blade etched with a brand, Weimar steel. Seared upon its surface gleam, a name dropped out of nowhere, echoing a fragile republic spun out of clouds, collapse, aspiration, a temporary eye spot in the circling weather of war. And further echoes from the history of weaponry and iron, the damned tributaries of the Rhine, the roars reverberating thunder beating artillery into being, industrialists who steal the ear of emperors and build an empire of steel. The currents circling even deeper through climate systems of conflict, the infrasonic rumble of imperium, Kaisers who mass troops on frontiers and take their title from the Caesars. Cold clasps my shoulders. I want to turn back to the lighted room behind me, its haven built of bookshelves, warmth, and words, the past's accumulating legacy, old voices murmuring from quiet pages. Enter Ammianus Marcellinus, soldier turned historian, witness to disastrous campaigns and death, one of the recorders who keep trying to read the currents. This empire is crumbling. Rome's enchained defense, its line of forts forged along Gaul's rim, is rusting. The Republic's white arc glow, its legend of discipline, its iron resistance to foes ringing the city, has long since blurred. The restless clans that raid its borders are now half Roman in blood and armaments. The whole continent surges with migration, tribes pour from place to place like liquid seeking level. They want land or loot, conquest, or a place to be at peace, escape from rulers, or simply openness of fields. Their tongues tangle, bloodlines intermingle. They are the changing weather of the world. This bitter winter night, the city light that blanks the stars and stares at the metal wedge stamped on snow, my small staked territory. I am here, another echo in the infrasound of history, clanging kingships, twang of borders, snapping and reshaped. The fast clash of battle speeds away, fades, but its long, low, underlying wavelengths propagate against oceans, carry force, the power assumed to break bodies, push them aside. My own folk, Celts, caught and tumbled by the fierce inrush of war and the tidal flats it leaves behind. Poverty, vassalage, fervent dreams, pushed to the far edge of Europe, then helping push empires over oceans, even here to this northwest corner of a continent. Through the silence of frost, currents surge and crash below my hearing. I bow my head, weighted down legatee of empire. Human history is a weather stirring constantly in conflict's climate. Anger, the axis our species spins around, our nature a wobbling ball tilting season to season, eon to eon, interacting cycles that tow an atmosphere in which we're all susceptible molecules compelled to participate. Landscapes claimed, colonized, borders blurred by blood and burnings, blasts of man-made armament, tanks massed, rifle barrels and barrel chests and borrowed time. Weapons rain, the sky grows deadly. All war is civil war, internal to ourselves. I lift knife from snow surface, finger its frost-forged edge. Could such a token simply arrive from sky? Could some corvid's claws be strong and strange enough to drop it here? We always seek for portents in the changing patterns of heaven. But the hedge-rimmed patch of sky above me will not communicate. Above the streetlight, no stars announce omens. Centuries ago, a star seared across this whole territory. Iron lump of asteroids, screaming brilliance, roaring to rest near the Battle River. Child who fell from the sky, the people named it, those who dwelled here long before the fences, who watched the wild sky streak and found its landed hammer. Meteorite molded by the flowing heat of passage, metal melted into smooth pits, ripples, the warm liver brown of ore frosted with a faint net of silver. We ponder what it means, this object, in which some see a bison head, others the contours of a human face or a landscape of cliffs rising from the roll of prairie. And I think of convolutions in a human cortex. We are all historians, recording past to foretell inscrutable future. Many said that its arrival meant the land and buffalo belonged to everyone, should not be battled over. Some maintained Creator had sent it as protection. Should it be taken, sickness and famine would follow, as they did in the plundering centuries after settlers poured onto these plains and stole Manitou Asani away. Now the spirit rock waits in a round room ringed by braids of sweet grass, fragments of offering. It is iron forged before iron was a weapon. But the hammered artifact I hold is human. This blade locked into white thermoset plastic. This blade with its German name that might be made in China. The whole world is involved in this, our terrible, obstreperous times. I have been sheltered behind my tall, tough hedges, but now feel stripped, unprotected, naked to the sky. This toss of aggression completes some series of purposeful acts whose history I cannot know in full. Anxious colonist, I lift my hands seeking some other augury, a message from the realms beyond anger, some small omen of hope. And I'd like to, I have to say this is maybe not my most cheerful book. At one point I was seriously considering calling it All the Apocalypses, but at the same time it's not without hope. Although these feel like very fraught times, as I said before, they are not the end times. So I'd like to read you one last sonnet from the sequence that's about the enormous changes that have been wrought by geology and evolution, and which witness the immense resilience of life. Time flows through history. The future comes at me in flakes and raindrops, the sudden midnight rain releasing drought, the relief of liquid that takes its shape from where it finds itself. Now, this moment that suspends its translucent page between past and future, like a flickering screen on which the transient makes patterns that constantly reshape themselves. Here is where I find myself for now. Beyond the window pane, the garden's cracked, compacted skin expands and heals, while liquid time pours on and does not end. Thank you so very much for being here.
Thank you so much, Alice. You're remembering your 2000 book that we published, and I was thinking you were also in a pamphlet we published 10 years ago on the 25th anniversary of the series. And you also appear in the anthology Poetry as a Liturgy, as does David. And I think that's the last time perhaps the two of you were here under this roof when we had the reading in the spring of 2007. Hildi Froese Tiessen, whose biography you can find in your program, is a distinguished scholar of Mennonite literature. And she, David, and I all come from Winnipeg. And the last time the three of us were under the same roof, I think, was in 1966, when we were all freshmen at United College. She's a longtime friend of David's and is now going to introduce him. Hildi.
As the program for this evening reports, David Waltner Toews, we knew him as David Toews then, and I went to high school together in Winnipeg. We were friends there and have remained friends these 60 years since. At school, David was an all-around student drawn to the arts and driven by big meaning questions of the sort generally defined and addressed by philosophers and theologians and historians, of which his family and extended family included a few. His interest in literature found expression in poetry even then. Literature was one of the forces that drew us together, though we came to it from different angles, David as a creative writer, and I as a literary critic who on several occasions published David's poems and stories in journals or anthologies I edited. It was as a literary critic that in the first months of the pandemic, while sheltering in place, I wrote a long essay for the online journal Hamilton Arts and Letters, drawing on letters and interviews I had conducted with David. It was great fun for me to reflect on the life and work of this poet/epidemiologist and to recall some of the ways our lives and literature have intersected. After completing the first year of an undergraduate degree at the University of Winnipeg, where, as Dave just said, all three of us were students, David Toews decided to travel the world. He set out alone, traveling across the Pacific from Montreal in August 1967. That fall, he wrote to me, quote, "At present, I am traveling with 13 kids in 2 ex-Army open-back trucks. We're doing a meandering camp-out tour of Turkey, Persia, Afghanistan, Pakistan, India, Kashmir, and Nepal. After that, I'm on my own again, I think. I'll try to get a job in Southeast Asia for a while." When this young vagabond returned to Canada after 16 months abroad, he settled briefly in Vancouver, and after a rather brutal few months of manual labor in a West Coast sawmill, moved to Indiana, where he completed a degree in literature at Goshen College and met and married Kathy Waltner, who's here, the love of his life. After much soul-searching, as they say, he decided that a career in science was likely to afford him more opportunities to have an impact on the human condition than would a career in the arts. Moreover, it would also allow him an opportunity to earn a living and to travel. So with an eye to becoming a veterinarian, after being inspired, he has admitted by a number of things, including captivating motion picture documentaries about the animal kingdom, he enrolled in science and math courses he needed to apply to veterinary college, and within a few years was practicing veterinary medicine. When after 2 more years, the profession he had trained for failed to offer the challenge and satisfaction he had anticipated, he enrolled in a PhD program in analytic epidemiology and embarked on the work that would define his career in science. He focused on zoonoses, the diseases that jump from animals to people. All this while, and during a distinguished career that took him many times around the world, working at the forefront of ecosystem health, David continued to write poems, stories, detective fiction. Alongside these, he wrote lively and engaging popular science volumes on viruses, epidemics, foodborne diseases, humans eating of insects, and the origin of feces. David's work, whatever the subject, tended to reveal that the creative writer and the scientist in him were quite comfortable with each other, and his writing, whether in genres we associate with science or literature, was inevitably informed by his poetic disposition. And today, David Waltner Toews' abiding and flourishing poetic voice is nowhere more evident and engaging, complex and inspiring than in his most recent collection of poems, The Gravity of Love. In this volume, we find, amidst echoes of Joyce and Auden, Yeats and Eliot, Mary Oliver and Leonard Cohen, a poet at home on earth, exploring what it is, he says, that really matters. Here we encounter woods and streams, earth and sky, elephants and blackbirds, fish and rattlesnakes, frogs and fungi. The language of this volume of poems is tactile, sensual, lavish. Lyrical phrases and compelling rhythms give voice to insights and observations about how we lost the earth, asserting at the same time that even in this broken world there is room for hope. And evident always is the struggle for beauty and grace and life's wondrous ache. This is a collection of poems that are at once accessible and inspiring, poems uttered by a lyric voice resonant with a lifetime of honing, an earnest, finely tuned voice, both corporeal and spiritual, a voice that is at once urgently probing and gentle. And each new reading of this work, every rereading, offers fresh rewards. So let the reading begin. I'm delighted to introduce David Waltner Toews.
I printed it out on large paper because I wasn't sure that I could read this small print, but the light is actually very good, so I might actually read from the book. The first section of the book, called Being Here, is based on, inspired by a photographic collection by Alice Benezia, who's an Italian physicist, philosopher, visual artist, and I've known her as a photographer as well as all of these other things. And I sometimes, the first time I read some of these or was writing them, I thought I would need the pictures, the photographs, but now I've come to think of them as perhaps Mussorgsky's pictures at an exhibition, in which case you don't see the pictures, but they're there. So if it seems a little eclectic sometimes, that's what's happening. I'm going through her portfolio, which you can find online. A newborn opens his eyes. A newborn opens his eyes to the slanting light. There are no words for the laughing wonder of 4 fingers, 1 hand, a bassinet. There is a chair where light is seated awaiting darkness, where knowledge awaits wisdom, where an unseen man awaits her touch, imagining the fearful grief of her symmetry, of seeing being seen and still not seeing, of letting go of holding. He could be happy just skittling like a spindly branch over the cobbles, and here, at just this angle, at just this height, to cock his head and wag his tail, to see between the balustrades a river, between the mannequins a wind chime of legs, to piss on the wall just for relief, and to see the stones grimace helplessly at his happiness. Beyond a dry stacked wall, the trees hedge in. This side, the sky opens, where trees lean together in the wind, and a path leads beyond the mountains, beyond the bright haze of our being, to the bleak and beautiful dwellings of bright and bitter gods, the eroticism of ice clefts, the dendrites of their unthinking being. I long to lay down here on stone, to rest, to dream, but not just yet. I do not wish at death to say I was here, passed by, saw this and that, a sleeping baby, a woman or a dog, asleep or dead, a gnarl of roots, a broken chair, an empty library, a quietly defiant tree. I want to declare, yes, yes, I do, in sickness and in health, until I overstayed my welcome and fell topsy-turvy into the toppled world's embrace, and by my last breath spoke, I am here. One more from this photographic collection, The Wall Within. Beyond this brindled wall, a scarecrow beckons, and the birds come home to roost, settlers in the thorny arms of stubborn citrus trees. A wrinkled grandmother braces herself, her claws grasping the earth, pushing through deep pain, contracting pain. The midwife looks beyond, above the smooth swell pressed against her palm, to the blanched and threadbare Madonna blue sky. From darkness, soft and red and wet, spill little citrus spheres of light. Oh, Sarah, in this land of milk, honey, and locusts, you were right to laugh. What child is this born under the bleak and blazing sun, the chain a stone's tongue, retching at your angry sufferance, your face a cipher writ in widow's webs and crow's feet? Tell me again what I was supposed to have missed. Tell me the story of the belabored white horse, a silhouette in famished armor, a nuclear shadow half peeled from the wall. Explain to me, as we descend this twisted goat track, how the sunlight scatters before us, transfiguring grains of sand into dazzling diamonds, and why, no matter how gingerly we tread, we are left bleeding. Carl Hebert was a well-known, well, to some people, photographer, ultralight flyer. He's known for his aerial photography in particular, from various places, including over Waterloo County, where I live. And I asked him one time if he could take me up in his ultralight plane and how much it would cost. And he said, sure, he'd take me up, and what he wanted was poetry in payment. So I wrote 5 tercinels and a sonnet based on a combination of essential elements, Chinese and Greek. And I'll read a few of those here. Views from an ultralight, Earth. At birth, from Edvard Munch-like mouths were yanked awake, earthbound, jacked out like calves, or slipped from our good breeding into chilly-skinned, no clothes, into the ache of teat-warm happiness in straw, and then were schlepped under plum-yellow maple leaves, a dream out of the bursting blue, earthbound, jacked out like calves, or slipped out just to take the air, to take a little light postpartum cool music, notes blowing free like socks on the line, wandering among plum-yellow leaves. We dream out of the bursting blue of 7 happy minutes of blackbirds, windrowing over the maple by the cornfield, making a score of music notes, blowing free like socks in the wind, wondering on this apple-skinned fall day if we only fall to the shore of the air sea, our lives but seeds for trees, for blackbirds to fly again over, the maple by the cornfield, making a score of years pass without noticing, full of jobs, kids born and raised, pies baked, and on this day I wish for nothing more but to wind swim, a swain of the air sea, our lives but seeds for trees, for blackbirds, to fly again from our good breeding into chilly-skinned, no clothes, into the ache. Views along the Grand River. Low-flying, open air, we crest a swell, our wake like that of guileless fish in the sky-blue sea. We lean over the river, heading for the lake, straining for home, gardens, friends, walks, freedom, wholeness. How could we live if we'd such peace like that of guileless fish in the sky-blue sea? Yet if there's only sea and sky, where's the solace of our passions, the dear conflicted yearnings of the heart? How could we bear our holiness? How could we live if we'd such peace? Creatures of slough and swamp, the cares that give us reason are born of thirst, of thunderheads, of passion, the dear conflicted yearnings of the heart. How could we bear no lack but that of lost desire? How could we live within such placid dread? What use the thrill of open flight, this wind-to-mouth resuscitation that gives us reason born of thirst, of thunderheads? We celebrate the radiator's steam, the inspiration flying low, open-aired, cresting a swell, awake to the thrills of flight, the spirit's mouth-to-mouth resuscitation. We lean over, heading for the lake. One more from that section. The woods. I do not know whose woods those are. I do not care to know. We fly above them, see the fox along the trees escape into the shadows, pause. We glide along the river's graceful turn of phrase among the stuttering urban landscapes, above the maples, poplars, oak, the green-roofed barns. Enough to know we fly above them, see the fox along the trees escape into the clouds. Let them stand arms akimbo, wish us good or harm. We are above all that, the truckers and the market, our heads above the maples, poplars, oaks, the green-roofed barns, where farmers walk from shadows, smooth, sun-warmed wood, hitch Clydesdales to the plow. It is illusory to think we are above all that, the truckers and the markets, that heads can somehow disattach from stomachs, that without bread there can be dreams. My hopes for earth's redemption yawn, hitch Clydesdales to the plow. It is illusory to think it matters more who owns the woods than that the woods are there. I do not know whose woods those are. I do not care. There can be dreams. My hopes for earth's redemption yawn into the shadows, pausing. We glide along the river's graceful turn. I'm not going to read from the next section, which is called Debris Found at the Poetry Crash Site. It's even a bit too dark for this season. What to be thankful for. I'll read from that. How are we doing for time? Okay. Trees, water, a sense of wonder, a wedding dance. Let's do that. Trees. 1. White pine, Douglas fir, yellow cedar. Canadian white pine sawmill, Vancouver, Fraser River, 1970. They weigh heavily against our hooks and chains, these avuncular, waterlogged Gandhians, skulking in the sloshing flotsam. The union steward is telling me in his stalwart Anglo-Dutch I should read Kropotkin. He is thinking about workers, better pay, guys at the pub, a TV. I am considering ecology, mutual aid, trees, coevolution. How far from this mephitic fog, the creaking silence, the prickly blue-green shrug of a wind-blown branch, the soft-headed moss. Behind us, bark disheveled, the old tatterdemalions scream with the bandsaws, karaoke blues from hell. They're just trees, after all, I tell myself. This is not family. At the green chain, my shoulders ache from yanking them, resisting, away from the glare and clattering steel onto the cool stacks in the dark behind me. 2. Maple, aspen, fir, South Cape chin, Niagara escarpment. The wooden furniture creaks, falls silent. Does it accuse? A table, a pencil, a roof over my head, a door? Out there, arthritic roots cling to rocks along the escarpment, clawing up the precipice, leaning out giddily into the spray, gathering in hollows along the crest. Roots unclenched, they topple across my path. My body returns again and again to that quiet breathing, the life-giving sotto voce sigh, the light patter of sun and rain drizzling from the canopy. I cannot get enough of walking among the trees, their thoughtless, perfect love that holds and lets me go. 3. The craft. O sacred grove, now wounded, what can requite thy worth? Word grooved with caring hand to word, a craft to bear us, earth to earth. Can always come back to water, but I want to make sure I read 2 more things to be thankful for, and I'm going to need a drink of water to be able to do this. The next 2 poems that I'm thankful for were written for the weddings of my children. The first one here is for my son Matthew. It's called A Sense of Wonder. For camouflaged leopard frog noses holding their breath so still, poking out through mats of green algae at the rocky shore, for the boy who sees and collects them in a pail and lets them go leaping into the green grass again until they disappear. And the waves clap their hands on the rocks, for the birds singing trees, for the man who sees the nuthatches with his ears, their skinny little legs and sharp claws running up the bark tracks, poking in search of tiny bugs, and the bright alarm of cedar waxwings at our passing, for the wonder of the rattlesnake on the trail, that understated rain stick warning, for someone to see with, to hear with, to remember with, to mourn with the frogs who are not here, the birds who have fled, the silence of a northern fall. Give thanks for bugs and snakes and salamanders under rotting logs, for frogs under the muck awaiting spring. Give thanks. Give thanks especially for birds, loons and mergansers and warblers, for their sharp-tongued arpeggios and fugues singing promises of their return. Give thanks. And this was at Rebecca's wedding. It's a wedding dance in the high Andes. She didn't get married in the high Andes. She got married in Pennsylvania. But she did meet her, she did go dancing in the high Andes. Let's put it that way. Now let us sate our craving for the thrum and tune of the offbeat, the off-chance, tittering at the edge of the known musical Andes, encircling her queen, Puya Ramondii, our hands forever never letting go, fandangoing the high pass chill, the paths, the crags, the trembling clefts, spinning to the moonlight in every radiant thing, high-heeling to the edge, pulling each other back, the air so thin it takes our breath away, the heavens so close, so dazzling, so deep. Let us explicate the physiology of this dance, the cure for folding over like an origami bird, for this almost too much world, which is harmony and rhythm, which is how we are healed, with a flutter of hands, with coca tea and the zum-zum of bees, with the syncopated jazz funk of a summer's eve, folding with sighs into the cagey limbs of Polylepis. Before the birds shuffle their peckish wings, bewitching earth-weary worms with their cha-cha-chattering, pirouetting in a syncopated Merce Cunningham beach bird prance, and tug us back into the click-track of a make-and-break all-together tango day. Milton Hikes the Bruce Trail. I won't read that title poem. It's a bit long. I think I read it here last time, actually, because it was part of a collection. But I will read Dark Animal at Night. At midnight, a rusty creak, whack and snap, yanks me from sleep. I stumble to the log cabin's back door. Some intruder has flung it open, then shambled off, leaving behind a scraggy, perfumed cloak of pine scent, surf, and sodden musk. I pull the door and hook it shut, slip back into streams of my unconscious. Then the old snap, bang, who's there again, on their haunches, grunting, damning thumblessly at the latch. Who would build a thing like this that smells of fish, wood, and a wall that opens only sometimes for no good reason? I wave my rifle. They see me through the glass. What do I want, waving that stick? Amid a rush of shoes and scats, shawled in the shadowy play of a full moon, they amble back into a thick curtain of furs. Back under cover, I lie quietly, quivering with dark, heartsick desire. Old dog, old bear, old self, pawing at the window. The Queen of Sheba visits Paris, 2005. Late night, Addis Ababa. I stare out the window of a rattletrap airport taxi. The city is a tachycardic seduction of gaunt anticipation, self-assurance, and quiet sadness. She chats softly, urgently, through a dark veil. From her ears dangle glittering question marks. Her breath is pungent with coffee and cut, softened with sour hints of injera. She whispers incense and intrigue. If Solomon could not resist, what chance had I? Tomorrow, the taxi driver says, at dawn, we will protest. Why, I asked. Bad elections, he says. How will you protest? He takes my bag from the boot, hands it to me. We will honk our horns, he says. I laugh. What a celebratory protest. In the hazy dawn, I stand at my barred window, listening for the Queen's awakening. A slight breeze riffles the white curtain's hem. The sudden drunken barks, the laughter of hyenas startle birds from the trees, join a cacophonic chorus of taxis, students, politicians, and presidential soldiers. The soldiers shoot the students, shatter the taxi windshields, dispatch the politicians to hospitals, jails, and back alleys. Later, I drink at the Intercontinental among diplomats in dark suits, ties loosened, conflicted by conscience and fear, arguing about African unity. Driving me back to the hostel, the taxi driver mutters, "This happens every few hundred years." As dusk settles, hyenas hustle from the alleys, tracking the scents of slow-moving drunks and fallen students. Back in my hostel, I look for news on the internet. In Paris, unemployed young Africans are burning cars, crying out for Babette and Eugène Delacroix, something, anything to feed their insatiable hunger for food, for meaning, for beauty. In the street, a taxi passes silently. Riding shotgun, the Queen of the South tucks back her veil, plucks off her earrings one by one. She knows they would not pass security and does not want to miss her flight to Paris. Those of you who might not know it, that's actually the Queen of the South bringing judgment is actually from the book of Matthew. Who knew, right? From the last section, The Gravity of Love, I'll read two short poems. The Fierce Desire. When you sat on the bench at Cove Head Bay and watched the great blue heron, you imagined heaven's birds, the generous grace of flight across a harvest moon. You did not imagine this bird, standing more still and slim than its rippling reflection in the shallows near the kelp-littered rocky shore. The heron stands in the watery, amoebic moon, absolutely still. You had not imagined a second heron's spindly walk as if on hot coals, the sudden piercing javelin beak thrust, the heron's flap attack, their great wings opening, necks unsprung and beaks a-clack, their hacking brays skipping like rocks across the water. You had not imagined their saurian ancestry to be so suddenly, furiously there. One heron steps and lifts into the black sky. The other's feathered cloak opens, closes, opens, closes, its neck a question mark. When you had first imagined this scene, you had not considered how hard won the Scrabble is for beauty and grace, how much is hunger, how much is paying attention, patience, and the fierce desire of life. And the title poem, The Gravity of Love. When I lie back on the wet grass, and you, wherever you are, on a pebbled shore or a meadow, lie down as well, and we gaze into the vast darkness, you into yours, and I into mine, and in that lucid moment, neither day nor night, the world that lies between us is what holds us together. All the dark that matters, skeins of children lost, tectonic plates, a crust of bread and rock, our molten core, primordial water into mist ascending. While high above, the moon's scent is so cold, so fresh, and through holes poked in the tense black dome, bright glints are stabbing from beyond the ever-present past or future. Perhaps where you are, a dawn already lightens up the sky, and all the stars I see are suns reflecting from your eyes. Is this not the essence of what we call love? To feel the reassuring pull of earth and rock, a beetle prickling by my ear, seeking some warmth in the wadis of my clavicle and settling there, scribbling brief messages of time and loss. Is not the gravity of what we share and cannot bear alone what makes us whole? Thank you.
Well, that concludes our reading for tonight. I'd like to invite you to go into the parish hall through this door to my left, and there's at least tea and assorted cookies and cakes. I think you can imbibe and eat. For those of you who are watching online, if you are interested in more information about the series, you can have a look at our website, www.stthomaspoetryseries.com. So finally, I just want to thank again Alice and David for their wonderful poems. Thank you, and good night.